The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome to the Marketing with Purpose series of the Bliss Business Podcast, where we explore what it really takes for marketing leaders to create impact that goes beyond the numbers. I'm Michelle, and in each episode, we sit down with marketing experts to explore their leadership approach and strategies that drive performance and resonate with their audience. Together, we'll dive into what's working, what's not, and how purpose and empathy can transform the way brands connect with people. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Sakach, founder and CEO of Zero Company Performance Marketing and aiCMO. With a background spanning digital media, journalism, and emotional intelligence, Stephen has built a reputation for designing marketing systems that scale with heart. Through Zero Company's mantra Bliss, build love into scalable systems, he has helped brands connect more deeply with their audiences, and with aiCMO, he's pioneering empathetic AI solutions that marry data with human values. In this episode, we'll explore bringing purpose and empathy into marketing, and I'm excited to dive in how meaning and metrics can go hand in hand. Welcome, Stephen.
It's great to be here. It's fun to be on the other side of the questions.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear why was bringing purpose and empathy into marketing the topic you chose to explore with us today, and what makes it so important right now?
Yeah, I think, it's something that we want to make sure people understand at the same time of, that it's profitable, right? That this is something that is not just this soft sort of skill or something that you can build a nice to have. This is actually, marketers want their data. So, we know that there's a 306% higher lifetime value when brands can form an emotional connection with their customers. So exploring purpose and empathy, it's not just soft, it's profitable. But I think what we also realize is that people are increasingly buying based on shared values, right? So it's vital, I think, for marketers to understand, that kind of alignment with their customers. So looking at the bigger picture, I think humanity is evolving more toward empathy and authenticity. This is kind of the way consciousness evolves, is we take on more perspectives, we become more empathetic. And so you're starting to see that mirrored more in the business consciousness out there. So you see things like the conscious capitalism movement, right, where business consciousness is kind of considering all the stakeholders of a business, not just the shareholders. So that's an empathetic kind of approach. So we're seeing this grow through business, and this is how healthy capitalism grows, right? It's really the future of business, and along with that, I think it's going to be the future of marketing. So purpose gives us that direction for our marketing, and then empathy really kind of gives us that calibration, right? It allows us to tune in to who we serve, and that purpose really allows us to define why we exist. And so I think those are really important with all the noise out there right now, more and more brands on social media. It feels like marketing has kind of lost its soul, but I think there's just so much noise that you really have to cut through that with some meaning. And then now we've got AI in the mix, right? And so if we don't scale love and empathy alongside that kind of AI decision making, we're just going to automate more and more disconnection.
Yeah, wonderful. Perfect answer. Thank you. CMOs are often pulled between near-term campaign results and long-term brand building. How do you ensure your marketing strategy stays aligned with the company's growth goals? And where do you find the biggest friction points in making that happen?
Yeah, I think, this goes back to that purpose, having that North Star, right? So that allows you over time to stay true to that purpose, with your marketing. So I love seeing campaigns that age well, like Dove Real Beauty, for like 20 years, they've stayed true to that purpose, helping women see themselves as beautiful. and really that came off this study where they saw like it was only like 3% of women, described themselves as that. And they're like, how can we be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, which you see a lot of, marketing in that beauty industry kind of doing. So they're able to run an ad 20 years ago that still holds up today because of, that purpose. So, that's not saying they're, not looking at clicks and not looking at, any of the data, but thinking about that long-term growth. That's kind of how you do it while being able to hit your KPIs and stuff. And the biggest problem I think a lot of times where you get that friction is sometimes you get those misaligned KPIs. Like you might have your finance, wants this high quarterly returns, return on ad spend, and they want more transactions. And so, your marketing leadership might be thinking a little bit different there. Instead of that short-term chasing of transactions, they may be thinking about long-term, building that emotional connection, building that higher lifetime value. So sometimes there's different goals there. And really when you're thinking just on that transactional kind of basis, you often don't think about what happens after the sale. How does the customer feel? Do they feel emotionally let down? This is really a lost opportunity when you don't look at that, because there's all this positive consumption emotions that you can help build so that you have, retention, or you have higher lifetime value, or your customers really, they end up becoming kind of your best, and loudest advocates for your business. And that's kind of, to me, kind of the holy grail of marketing, is when you can really get to that point where the customers are doing the marketing for you. But you can't do that with that short-term, thinking.
Agreed. Yeah. And you can bring somebody in the door, but then lose that connection, right? And that meaningful experience that they've had with you initially. And yeah, it always affects the bottom line as well as reputation too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. In high stakes situations like a brand crisis or market downturn, how do you maintain a sense of purpose and empathy while making quick strategic decisions?
I hope you have your purpose and you're kind of well-defined before that happens, because this is like crisis. This is when it reveals your character. This is when your values are really stress tests. So if you've got that clear purpose, you kind of, who you are during those moments. And you see brands that don't know who they are and kind of how badly they fail during these moments. So right now you could look at Target versus Costco. Like Target rolled back these DEI efforts under a lot of pressure and lost a loyal base. Costco, they were confronted with the same thing. They said, no, diversity, makes us strong. This is what, and you see the difference between the two. Costco, went through that controversy without issue. They knew who they were. They knew their hell yes. They knew their hell no. And Target, they're trying to be something to everyone at that moment and kind of watered down and didn't really know that answer. And now all their sales are tanking. They're kind of in crisis mode because of that. But really, that's kind of purpose in action, is when a company knows it or it doesn't know it. And then the other part of this, the market downturns, I think we all saw in COVID, how there's a lot of businesses that we had emotional connections to that maybe we didn't even realize, but now as a community, we wanted to support them because, somehow we had that emotional connection. Maybe they reflected our values or something. But you see, during these, when times are tough, these businesses that have that well-defined purpose and that emotional connection with their audience, these are the ones that can really survive because their base comes to help them. And we saw that a lot in COVID, is like, buying gift certificates, doing what they can to help keep that business, up. And so if you're loved by people during these crises, whatever they are, you can be transparent. You can even make a mistake during some of these issues. And as long as you're authentic about it and transparent about it, they'll even be like, yeah, you're human, right? We get it. We understand. We've all been there. And so, I think a lot of businesses really struggle with that. And, if they don't know what their purpose is, I always say, if you don't know, what to do in a situation. Just try and do the loving thing. And I think people may understand that, if you're transparent about that.
You always say that, and it's really one of my favorite things you say. And Stephen, I use that. I always think about that. Do the loving thing when you're not sure what to do, or if you're in a difficult or challenging situation. I think it is so empathetic and compassionate. So that I think is a huge takeaway.
And Michelle, like, you can be on the other side of the country, or we can have someone on the other side of the world, and if in our company, and if they're asking that question to themselves, I don't need to be micromanaging, or anything. We can trust kind of our purpose, and our mantra is being upheld wherever someone is, because we've kind of all got this, we're all rowing in the same direction. And so I hope when companies work with us, they can kind of feel that from top to bottom.
Yeah, I hope so too, because we definitely practice it internally, right? With every member of our team. We all believe it, and it's part of our, philosophy. And as you mentioned, it's really our North Star here at Zero Company. So, yeah. All right, let's see. When you're launching a new product or entering a new market, what's been your most effective way to align sales, product, and customer success teams? And where does that alignment tend to break down, if it does?
So again, this goes back to like the empathy. I think the best alignment will start with empathy. One of the most empathetic things we do as marketers is kind of the customer journey. So, kind of understanding that, and the full emotional arc of that, not just like the KPIs, but the full emotional portion of that customer journey. I don't think a lot of people dig into that emotional side of the customer journey as well as we do. But then, kind of using, some sort of empathy mapping or something to really look at how customers feel at each touch point, right? So I think once you have that in place, that's going to help align you with your customers. And then internally, real alignment happens, like we just talked about, when kind of that purpose becomes the boss, right? When everyone understands, why we're doing something, leaders can step back, teams can act creatively, right, within the shared mission. It's like, this is our goal, this is our purpose. How do we get there? We can come up with creative solutions because we have that kind of North Star with what we're doing as far as how you're executing. So that's kind of how you move from, I think, that micromanaged environment to really that inspired collaboration. And I think that's really kind of key for, when you're going to market with something, and, you want everybody aligned, and that you don't want any cross signals or anything like that. You want it aligned from top to bottom.
Yeah, definitely creates the most success and higher performance too, right, along the way, and results. Can you share a time when customer feedback or behavior data completely shifted your campaign direction, and what that taught you about balancing intuition with analytics?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think I've had a lot of moments where intuition told me something that the data couldn't prove yet, with analytics. So I remember, like, for one client, this is way back when, this is before we had the assisted sales data in analytics, right? So what that means is, like, when someone comes to the site, maybe they come to the site from a social ad, and then they come back from a Google organic listing, then they sign up for an email, and then finally they make a sale clicking on something on the email. Well, it used to be that email would get that final credit, right? And so you'd think about the importance, but really it was that whatever that first touch was. So in this case, social. So when we kind of were able to finally get assisted data, within our analytics, this is way back when, I hope this doesn't age me, but it really does prove that point, that it's like, it was like, yes, we knew that this channel was making a big impact, because when we turned it off, we'd see sales across the board all drop, but when you turn it back on, you'd see them all lifted, but we didn't have any data behind that. And so once we kind of were able to model that, it was like, okay, now we can prove it out, and we can double, triple, quadruple the spend here in this one area. So that's one area. And I think another area too, I remember we had a client where there was like no lifetime value data, and we suspected we could spend more for them and even lose on that first sale. because the repeat purchases were massive. And so when we finally got that data from them, sometimes it's really hard to get, lifetime data from clients. And so, but when we finally got that, the data confirmed, we could spend more and we could lose more on even this first sale. But now that allows us to triple our spend up front, and the business just exploded from there. So I think like that intuition, it helps you ask better questions of your data. It's not art versus science. It's kind of the two working in harmony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. What has been most effective in shifting marketing from a cost center to a measurable revenue engine in your company? I was going to say our company, but it's your company. And where do CRM, lead management, and sales intelligence still break down in your RevOps stack, limiting attribution and campaign performance?
Yeah, so break that apart a little bit. So I think you've got to have kind of that closed loop attribution. You got to be able to connect your ads and what goes into your CRM and the customer intent so that every dollar kind of maps, and so you can track that. I think that's important. For us, one of the key things, we looked at like studies like Google brought to us, comparing us to our peers. Mm-hmm. We're outperforming our peers in retention, like pretty dramatically. And so we do that, I think, because we don't just audit our data, in our sales process. We audit our humanity, right? We're going through this process. And I think really, that's when we talk about Bliss, building love and the scalable systems and all that, and that philosophy. That's what makes clients stay. And that's really does what make our work joyful, is because, we're continually kind of auditing that humanity, and it's kind of never stopping. But that's a huge differentiator for us when it comes to retention. Maybe we don't close as many clients as others, but we can retain a client for far longer. And to me, that's better business, just job satisfaction wise, being able to sleep at night. Are we doing well for our clients?
Yes.
To do that, I think it's really key. But I do think that what we're talking about, like in this area, is really the future of marketing. It's kind of this alignment where your growth, your empathy, your authenticity, your humanity kind of all start to align, kind of if you're thinking about this higher conscious, with more and more empathy. When you get that to all start to align throughout your business, and if marketing is being involved with helping audit your humanity of your business, then it makes all the difference. So, it's more fulfilling for the teams, and it's far more sustainable for revenue. And we just kind of love what we're doing more and more, I think, when we go through that process.
Agreed. And the work that we do for our clients is so important. It doesn't just impact, the board of the company or the CEO. It's their employees' families. So I think we really take that to heart, take it seriously, and keep that in mind in the work we're doing for them. So what's your approach to developing marketing talent so they not only hit performance goals, but also stay engaged and inspired? And where do you see leaders struggling most in retaining top talent?
So, I think with retaining talent, for sure, one of those issues is always just that purpose and meaning in work. And I think especially we'll see younger generations now even demanding more of that, and willing to make sacrifices based on that. And maybe the older generations realizing that matters more to them as we get older too. So I think that's kind of a big shift that's happening for us. I think, specifically kind of around building like high performing teams, that kind of thing. We want to make sure, there's mastery obviously in their skills. And so that's the kind of the area we first started on, was that technical mastery in our skills. And then we really added purpose into that, right, with kind of the Bliss approach that we take and all that. And then, and now we're on this journey of kind of autonomy. So we've kind of expanded through this sort of self-managed environment where I think it allows people to feel more empowered, and make more decisions by themselves, and think more like a business owner, in a lot of ways, which I think is super helpful for marketers. It's kind of a really big empathetic process to get to that point of where you're really thinking like a business owner, and making decisions with them. And so, we also, I think, we understand emotional intelligence is really important to leadership. So we do a lot of training, a lot of talking on all that. And so I think that's really helpful, for a lot of the retention that we have, for sure. But, making sure that the job just isn't like this soulless sort of job. And I think that era of like the soulless job of the command and control CEO is kind of fading a little bit, and purpose-driven leadership is rising. We're just seeing the numbers of all this slowly move. Can we accelerate that and help that make that shift? I think marketing actually can really lead here in helping make that shift. And people don't think of marketing that way, but we're the people who tell the
story.
Yeah, the story of the business, and it's like how we translate a company's soul into business, right? So
and their purpose, like Patagonia, right? They're really great at sharing their higher purpose and their goals for sustainability. Yeah, and the earth, right? Through all their campaigns, their brand voice is really present.
Yeah. And it's just one of those examples of businesses we see where we're going consciously. And so some businesses are already there. Yeah. And so it's like, maybe only, a small percentage are there now. 10 years from now, that percentage is going to be much bigger. 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be huge. So we kind of see where businesses are going.
Yeah, they're growing. And for employees, I read a study, Gallup did a poll that like disengaged employees. And so employees that have teams that are emotionally intelligent and leadership do better, perform better. And I read that a Gallup poll that disengaged employees cost the global economy $8.8 trillion. So it's really significant.
It's really one of those crises that people aren't talking about. So like in the US here, I think the level of engaged employees is 31%. So, that's means the majority of employees are disengaged. So they're going to work not finding any meaning in what they're doing day after day, hour after hour, month after month, year after year. And I'm glad, like I mentioned, like the younger generations, like, no, I don't really want to do that. The older generation, we kind of accepted this is a job, but we know it can be better now. We're seeing examples of it being better. So we're not kind of, going to be tolerating that much longer. And that's why I think you see these movements like conscious capitalism and, companies like Patagonia kind of rising up, because it's really what it is if you look back from an evolutionary standpoint, this is really just love trying to find its way, and so it's like doing the loving thing. What is it? And it comes across a lot of rigidity, a lot of people saying, no, can't do this. And that's where you get into all this conflict and trauma in that process. But really from a evolutionary standpoint, it's the gravity of love kind of moving through our business consciousness. And we're seeing where it can go. And we're seeing where it's at right now. It's not very healthy in a lot of places. And so it's giving people a bad taste about the current state of capitalism, I think.
Yeah. Love belongs everywhere, right? Even in business, or even especially in business. So
especially in business, we've got so much, especially on the marketing side, we are in charge of millions and billions of dollars in marketing budget that we can put out there, where we can actually blow up sales at the same time as do good, if we really put our hearts and minds to it and do it the right way.
Totally. Well, the last question we ask everyone is around purpose and empathy. When you think about the role marketing plays in your company's future, how do you feel about the role of purpose and empathy in creating genuine resonance, connecting with people in a way that reflects your company values? We've kind of been talking about this along the way, but I'd love to hear your answer.
For sure. I mean, purpose tells the story of, kind of why we exist, it's that why. And empathy really ensures that story lands in someone's heart, right? So without that, you can have a why that's really kind of dry and doesn't land. So the role of marketing is to help it land in someone's heart. And I think we're seeing AI come to play here, and that's going to help take over logic and decision making. But we want it to also think about things in a loving way, and we don't want it to be thinking about solely pursuing profit. We want it to be thinking about all the other stakeholders, in a business. And if AI is going to be the future of things, we really do need to help systemize kindness in our systems, so that it kind of understands that we're optimizing not just toward KPIs, but also maybe toward kindness, toward empathy, toward love, to make sure we're continually doing that. And that's really kind of the essence of our Bliss approach, is this continual sort of audit process. We need that embedded in kind of the foundations of AI right now, because otherwise it could go sideways on us really, really fast, where like I said, if it's optimizing toward profit, it's not going to care about people. It's not going to care about planet. So we really need to be thinking about it in that bigger way right now, because we're about to go on a crazy journey with AI. We don't know where it's going to end up. But I think all this, I know marketers, all of it sounds great, but really, if you look at all the data about empathy in marketing, about purpose in marketing, about emotional connection in marketing, it's the most profitable way to do business too. So not only is this kind of approach good, but it is the most profitable way. So if you need to sell that, into your boss or anything like that, there's just look up data on empathy and whatever you're doing or whatever your concern is, and you'll see some data points showing how much more effective an empathetic kind of approach to marketing, to running business is for you. So my hope is that more companies kind of join us on this journey toward, a more human and conscious form of capitalism and marketing.
Yeah. Love that. No, yeah. Care and compassion is important, right? In business as well. And the results, the revenue results, as you mentioned, there's statistics out there. What are they, like 306% growth or improvement? I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah, and that's just kind of an average. You'll see certain sectors, I know we do a lot of work in financial services where that lifetime value can go up to 800% if you build that emotional connection. So it's all there. The ROI is there for doing good. And hopefully, I think it's starting to resonate more and more as this becomes more and more important to the consumer.
And it makes everyone feel better too, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep, their heart feels better too. Thank you for joining us on the Bliss Business Podcast, Marketing with Purpose Kit Series. I hope today's conversation sparked new ideas for how you can align strategy, execution, and purpose in your own work. If you found value in this discussion, like, subscribe, and share it to keep the conversation going. And remember, great marketing doesn't just sell, it serves. See you next time.